In today's video, we're going to be talking about how to Forex your Bitcoin earnings. So we're going to be covering topics like MicroStrategy, how MicroStrategy leverages Bitcoin, how to 2x leverage MicroStrategy, recent Bitcoin news, and then a price prediction. Also, I'm sorry for not uploading for 3 years, but I had to finish school, although I am back now so you can subscribe, and I'm sorry if I gave you trust issues. Alright, so the first step of Forex leveraging your Bitcoin is understanding the company MicroStrategy that's currently taken over Wall Street. MSTR or MicroStrategy is a Bitcoin Treasury company that is up an astounding 622% the past year. This company's chart pretty much mirrors Bitcoin exactly, however it is more volatile as you will gain a lot more but also lose a lot more. Since Bitcoin's up, you've gained a lot more owning MicroStrategy than you would currently owning Bitcoin. Here is a chart of MicroStrategy compared to Bitcoin, and you can see MicroStrategy in the past 5 years is up 2,500%, while Bitcoin is up around 1,200%. You'll see that in the past 5 years, MicroStrategy has returned 2.13x what Bitcoin has. So for the sake of this video, we'll be conservative and call it an even 2%. Next, we're going to talk about how MicroStrategy operates as a Bitcoin treasury. So firstly, you should know MicroStrategy was already a billion-dollar software company before Bitcoin. They were profitable and originally started using their cash to form their Bitcoin position. MicroStrategy now makes money to buy more Bitcoin by selling shares to raise capital, and they also sell convertible bonds. Before the convertible bond explanation, it's also worth noting that MicroStrategy uses the capital raised from these two operations to buy Bitcoin. The CEO has also stated that he has no plans on ever selling Bitcoin. Here's MicroStrategy's convertible bonds simplified. The structure of the average MicroStrategy bond goes as follows. MicroStrategy sells 5-year corporate bonds with 0% interest and a conversion price set 50% above the current stock price. The incentive for the investor is as follows. Bondholders earn no interest but gain the option to convert their bonds into shares if the stock price rises above the conversion price. So if the stock price rises, bondholders convert their shares into a profit. If the stock doesn't rise, bondholders only get back their principal after 5 years. It's important to note that if the bondholders do convert their shares, MicroStrategy no longer has to pay back the principal amount. Here's how conversion works with these bonds. The majority of the bonds MicroStrategy is selling look very similar to this. The majority of these bonds being sold are 5-year bonds with 0% interest and a conversion price around 50% of the current stock price. Let's imagine a $750 conversion price. If the stock price surpasses $750, bondholders can exchange the bonds for shares. So for a $1 million bond, they'd get shares worth $1 million at $750 a share. If shares are trading at anything more than $750, like $800 for example, they have the option to also sell the shares for a profit. If the lender does convert their shares, this results in new shares being issued, which dilutes the existing shareholders. However, shareholders generally accept this because the dilution only occurs after significant stock price appreciation, as the conversion price is set to 50% or higher of the stock price. So why is this the hottest bond on the entire market right now? It's attractive to bondholders for a few reasons. One being that investors effectively get indirect Bitcoin exposure without buying Bitcoin directly. Many institutional portfolios can't hold Bitcoin or are not allowed to. The same goes with Bitcoin ETFs. But however, they can buy bonds. This exposes them to Bitcoin while having the safety of a bond. These bonds are in such high demand that there is a secondary market that allows trading bonds before conversion, often at a premium. This benefits MicroStrategy in a few different ways. If the stock keeps rising, conversions will reduce the need to pay back bonds in cash, as they don't have to pay back the principal amount of the bond. This lets MicroStrategy use the Bitcoin treasury without liquidating it. You can think of this as a way MicroStrategy uses this to get free cash. It's of course not entirely free, as there is share dilution if the lender decides to convert their shares. People have just been calling it free cash as they don't have to pay back the principal. Historically, Bitcoin's been rising at about 60% per year, and these bonds have conversion prices that are just 50% above the current stock price in 5 years. So lots of people buying these bonds see this as low risk with potential for high rewards, which is partly why these bonds are in such high demand. There is of course some risks with this strategy. If the stock price doesn't rise, which of course is highly tied to Bitcoin, the company has to repay the bonds in cash at maturity. Some of the lenders made options to include rolling over the debt into new bonds. But if they can't do that, they'll have to pay with operating cash or by selling Bitcoin. Selling Bitcoin in a bear market could further depress the prices and spiral downward, while issuing new shares to raise cash would just dilute existing shareholders. A tweet from the CEO on December 5th reveals just how much this Treasury operation is making for MicroStrategy. Year to date, MicroStrategy Treasury operations delivered a Bitcoin yield of 63.3%, a net benefit of 119,800 Bitcoin to our shareholders. At 103,000 per Bitcoin, that equates to 12.3 billion for the year so far, making us the most profitable, fastest growing company on the Bitcoin standard. Now let's get into how to forex your Bitcoin. So MSTU is an ETF. This ETF follows MicroStrategy, but it is 2 times leveraged. This means the ETF will attempt to have double the gains of the normal MicroStrategy ticker. These leveraged ETFs come with some risk. A 2x leverage ETF does not simply mean 2 times the gains and 2 times the losses. These ETFs are susceptible to what's called leverage decay. Now simplified, the more stock goes down after you buy it, the more gains you will need just to break even again. So for example, you buy a 2 times leverage ETF at $100. Later that day, the stock drops 10%, which causes your ETF to drop 20% to $80. The following day, if the ETF gains 20%, you only gain 20% on that $80, which is $16, giving you a total of $96 for the leverage ETF after 2 days, while the original stock price would return 10% of the $90, which would bring it back to $99. So basically, the leverage ETF compounds every day. So if you have lots of losses, you will need more gains just to break even and follow what the non-leveraged stock is doing. Lastly, I want to say these leverage ETFs are not for long-term holds. Volatility alone can be the reason that you lose money over time. Even if the stock were to just trade sideways with a leverage ETF, you're more likely to lose money. As for what I'm doing right now, I'm pretty bullish on Bitcoin in the short term, so I've invested in MSTU and MSTR. This chart shows the market dominance of the US dollar. It's broken below its trend line for the first time in 7 years, showing that the dollar is losing strength. And a lot of people see Bitcoin as an alternative to the dollar. Here's another chart that shows Bitcoin ETFs compared to gold ETF. It's specifically showing you BlackRock's ETFs. It shows that Bitcoin's net assets of the funds are $33 billion, while gold is now lower at $32 billion. This is significant as Bitcoin has only been an asset class for such a short time compared to gold and is yet already past it. This is of course just in the ETFs and not the actual market caps of Bitcoin and gold. However, there are a lot of people speculating that a significant chunk of the gold market cap will flow into Bitcoin. Check out my Patreon down below if you want to follow along all the moves I make in the market, including all buys and all sells. If you learned anything new, consider subscribing. And if you have any questions, comment them down below and I'll be sure to answer. Thank you.